In version 1.4 of Zenless Zone Zero, Hoshimi Miyabi debuted as the game's first playable Void Hunter who has been dominating all forms of endgame content due to her insanely inflated damage output and brain-dead playstyle. Her very existence has not only choked the life out of any old and new ice agents through guilt by association to her, but has also dramatically raised the power floor for all anomaly agents going forward to prevent underperforming banner sales when compared to the all-ears Virgil clone. Vivian, Alice, and the anomaly-dedicated support Yuzuha were all scaled up in power with Miyabi in mind. Had she not existed, their power would have been much closer to the majority of the attack agent roster that's been lagging behind for ages. If you're wondering why Jane Doe and Bernice underperform when compared to their similar counterparts in Vivian and Alice, it's because Miyabi came out after Jane Doe and Bernice and raised the bar. Fast forward to version 2.1, and Anomaly has effectively become the only playstyle worth playing in Zenless Zone Zero. Attack agents could not be carried by Evelyn alone, and many people were not sold on Rupture beyond pulling Yijuan either because they liked the character or as a speculative investment for when Rupture would eventually take off. All because they couldn't reel in the power of the katana-wielding Fox Theron. So when version 2.2 rolled around and the ZZZ team had to somehow convince players to pull for the dying archetype of attack agents, the only reasonable solution they could come up with was to throw the baby out with the bathwater and handicap the entire team combinations of Anomaly and select agents just to knock Miyabi down a peg. This culminated in the disastrous public reception that was the 2.2 Deadly Assault rotations, that god-awful attacker buff, and the Defiler boss. I want to dissect each of the bosses that debuted in the first rotation of Deadly Assault from 2.2 from my perspective to give an idea of just how dog shit this was all for me. For context, I was someone who had owned every single Anomaly agent. My attack agents were only a Mindscape 2 Ellen Joe, a Zhu Yuan, and a Haramasa, but with no Qingyi and no Trigger to support the latter two's burst DPS playstyle, and I had no Rupture agents to speak of. Now, I know some of you are already telling me I was being greedy and stupid for putting all my investment into Anomaly agents, but let me remind you, aside from Evelyn, Attack did not have a leg to stand on. Ambi was garbage and was the fastest character to be buffed in modern Hoyoverse history, and Hugo had to compete with Yijuan and every revealed version 2 character for your polls. So why the hell would I take that risk on the stun gauge eating vampire? Without further delay, let's look at the bosses: the Miasma Priest, the Miasmic Fiend, and the Defiler. First up, we have the Miasma Priest, Hoyoverse's first offense of Anti-Miyabi content. This enemy has a mechanic that gets increased resistance to anomaly buildup every time they swap phases. It can only be cleansed once halfway into the fight after stripping their miasma shield, but that doesn't stop them from reapplying the effect throughout the remainder of the fight. Right off the bat, every anomaly character is suffering Miyabi's long-standing stranglehold on the meta, and if you're a big Ellen Joe fan like me, you can't use her either because of the ice resistance. I didn't have too much issue with the Miasma Priest when they debuted in version 2.0 and their total HP was much smaller, as I could still brute force Anomaly so long as I had Yuzuha in the team. But as we also saw a big increase in HP inflation at the start of version 2.2, I couldn't just get by anymore with half an Anomaly team. This was only made worse by the second boss, the Miasmic Fiend, the least offensive boss on this list, as it just asks for a dedicated Anomaly team. And since I had every Anomaly character, I thought this would be just fine. But that did not turn out to be the case. You see, you would think that because it was weak to Anomaly, I could just slot in a weaker character and save my stronger agents for the Priest. Unfortunately, the Miasmic Fiend is resistant to fire, so Bernice, an objectively weaker Anomaly agent, could not be put here, and I needed someone to better fit the element lineup. Jane Doe could have worked had I put her in monophysical, but again, that would leave me with no strong option against the Priest. And again, since the Fiend wants an Anomaly team, my Ellen Joe just wasn't gonna cut it. And finally, we have the Defiler, an anti-anomaly, anti-Miyabi, anti-ice abomination that set the ZZZ community on fire. I'm sure you've already heard enough about her invincibility phases, so don't worry, that is not my focus of the discussion at all. My focus on the discussion is Hoyoverse's sheer audacity to balance a boss with so many countermeasures that effectively tells any anomaly player to shove a hand grenade up their ass and pull the pin on it. Right off the bat, we have a hard 25% reduction to all anomaly damage, because why ease players out of the anomaly meta you've cultivated for more than half of the game's lifespan when you could just give them a massive fuck you? Secondly, we have her tsunami mechanic. The massive blade you have to break to create a protective barrier is immune to any and all anomaly buildup. If your anomaly characters don't do enough raw damage, you have to say goodbye to one of your agents for the second half of the fight. Yes, it is possible to brute force this with anomaly teams, but we're not talking about the Defiler in a vacuum as an anomaly account. We're talking about the Defiler in a lineup of 3 bosses where all 3 of them have individual circumstances that demands that I have to bring strong anomaly characters from my roster. All the while, my Ellen Joe that I've hyper-invested the hell out of can't be used anywhere because we cannot just admit that Miyabi was a mistake and just let her go.
爱莲作为开服的角色，对很多玩家以及制作组来说都有很大的纪念意义。希望老玩家能在这一次强化中获得好的体验，也希望新玩家能看到我们对角色的持续投入和诚意。
What a load of bullshit.
So, some of you might be asking, well, did you still 9-star clear? Yes, I did. After several hours and struggling to make anything work, I said screw it and threw a Nekomata wheelchair out and somehow pulled the 21k out of my ass. Just as a quick side note, I can't do this anymore in the current rotation as the HP inflation has gone up. I'm sure I could probably do it if I put more effort into it, but I'm not looking to spend 4 days and 20 plus hours to do that. Hi, this is me during the editing process. So I was trying to ponder why I could get the Nekomata team to clear at the time, but I couldn't brute force as easily with my anomaly teams, and I found out why. So I found the buffs that was part of that 2.2 Deadly Assault rotation, and the middle buff, which is supposed to kind of be anomaly, doesn't have an all-encompassing anomaly proficiency buff on it, which made it more problematic for me to brute force my teams across any of the anomaly-resistant content, but it allowed the Nekomata team to shine because of the physical damage. So yeah, just wanted to add a little note here that the one anomaly buff we had to work with is also just complete dog shit. So, if you 9-star cleared, what's the problem? Look, I have nothing wrong if the ZCC team wants to diversify the Deadly Assault enemy lineup to cater to the 3 DPS archetypes we have now in Zenless Zone 0. But you have to ease players into that transition. You can't just have an anomaly meta that started taking root all the way back in version 1.1, maintain its dominance throughout the entirety of the game all the way to version 2.1, and then just flip the switch on everybody. And if you thought the Anti-Miyabi content wasn't done yet, we have the upcoming Wandering Hunter in future Deadly Assault resets. So, you might be asking, the Wandering Hunter is weak to ice. How is it Anti-Miyabi content? Simple. The Wandering Hunter cannot be frozen using the ice attribute anomaly. It only deals the bulk damage from the shatter effect. This was likely done to hard counter Miyabi's mono ice meta, as the mono ice team does a majority of its damage during a stun window, and the freeze anomaly effect pauses the stun timer duration to maximize the team's damage output. And just as a quick refresher for anyone who possibly doesn't play ice teams all that much, the freeze effect from anomaly buildup in all previous endgame content is balanced by only being usable against ice weak bosses. Otherwise, you only get the shatter damage on the ice neutral and ice resistant bosses. Sacrifice Bringer is an ice weak boss from version 1.4 and can be frozen. Pompeii is an ice neutral boss from version 1.2 and cannot be frozen. Miasma Priest is an ice resistant boss from version 2.0 and cannot be frozen. And the Wandering Hunter is an ice weak boss in the current version of 2.3 but cannot be frozen. Freeze is an integral part to the identity of the freeze attribute anomaly and sets it apart from the other elements. Ellen Jo is an agent whose damage is backloaded into the end of her basic attack combo or basic/EX special loop if you have Mindscape 2. So being able to freeze a boss gives her some much needed breathing room to complete her combos. As for Hugo, freezing a boss during a stun period pauses the stun timer, which is incredibly strong as Hugo's totalize mechanic scales with the remaining timer on the enemy's stun period. Ellen herself also greatly benefits from a prolonged stun duration. So, to recap everything up to this point, Hoyoverse has cultivated an anomaly-focused meta for almost the entirety of Zenless Zone Zero's lifespan that peaked with the release of Miyabi and was perpetuated by additional anomaly agents after her release that continued to outdo the attack agent roster. Hoyoverse then tried to pull a fast one on us and make a complete 180 and thought they could get away with it, releasing multiple bosses in such a short time span that targeted the entire archetype with extreme prejudice, while at the same time screwing over fans of Ice agents not named Miyabi who were caught in the crossfire. As far as I'm concerned, Ice as an element is already 1 foot in the grave if they continue to try to push back against Miyabi. If you're someone who's pulling for the upcoming Yadari, I have a question to ask. Why are you? Because outside of waifu-related reasons, you are actively investing into a character who's part of an element that is currently under attack by the ZZZ development team. She wouldn't even make for a good agent for Rupture-focused Deadly Assault content, because even though there's only 2 bosses right now for Rupture agents, she already can't fight the Miasma Priest because of the aforementioned ice resistance.
So the guy that did this right here, he also did paintings and artistry of women being pleasured by an octopus. So this has been going on for a while. It really is. Remember what I said. That's crazy.
And it's only going to get worse if Hoyo continues their crusade against the mistakes they themselves made when balancing Miyabi for her release during what was supposed to be an attempt at a soft relaunch of Zenless Zone Zero. If no one else will say it, then I will. Hoyoverse, you're not being sly, you're not being subtle, we know what you're trying to do. Either nerf Miyabi already, or just leave it be and move on. I'm tired of having my favorite character being dragged through the mud by this stupid ass girl. Because at this rate, this cycle is going to repeat itself with every single hyped up character. I will put money down that in a year from now, we will start seeing content attempting to hard counter Rupture and Ether because of Yi Zhuan, especially now after the release of Lucia. And with Ye Xuanwang on her way, you better pray to God she doesn't share an archetype or element with your favorite character. Otherwise, they're next.